So I think I want to start with asking you, how did you get interested into kind of that subject? Like, you have a background as a model, right?
Yes. So I've been modeling my whole life since I was 11. And then you
That's
know how,
crazy. When you think about it, that's crazy.
yeah, your whole life, right? You know the drill. It's like you just do this and everything's like you don't even think about it. You're just like, oh, I'm getting hired. Like this is great. But then after the fact, like after you're just like around the industry for so long, like I started my blog 10 years ago and I started getting curious, when I'm meeting with brands, I was just like, who's making the clothes? What's going on with the beauty products? What's the end of life of the beauty products? Because oftentimes this stuff gets thrown out, right? At like,
Yeah, we don't think of the end of life. Yeah, it's a new
yeah,
kind of, it's amazing that 10 years ago you were interested in that, where, 10 years ago, no one was talking about it, basically.
yeah, I know it's crazy. Like, but there was laws that were, the microplastics, the microbeads in the beauty products that was passed 10 years ago. But I mean, some people are still using plastics in beauty products. But yeah, so I started there, then it was the blog. I was always curious. I started consulting with brands, and working with them just on one-on-one, just asking them questions, putting on some pressure, so that they could do better for people on the planet. And then I started working with the United Nations 6 years ago, and just doing public speaking engagements at the United Nations on individual action and sustainability goals, in my personal life. And just like things that I implemented, like for example, when I purchase products like produce, I'll try to buy, the produce that is not wrapped in plastics. I'll bring in my own bags, like just all these type of, things that we're just talking about. Being cognizant of like the travel that you're doing. If you're going to a certain place, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like what other meetings can you do there while you're there instead of like going, back and forth and just like burning up fuel or whatever. So reducing waste and advocating for brands to have a better kind of footprint as well. And then so that led into consulting. So I work with a few different sectors in the United Nations. I'm on this board, the UN Conscious Fashion Lifestyle network that received a CFDA award last year, which is really cool because we've been only doing it for about a year, right? I mean, UNEP has a different sector that works on like water and waste and stuff like that, but this was like specific for fashion and human rights for women and just like having more of an equitable space for women. And then I also work with UN Women. And yeah, so it just kind of like snowballed because at the time nobody was talking about this stuff that I knew of. It like the fashion industry didn't care about what was going on. They were just business as usual, and now it's like after the pandemic, you can't do business as usual anymore. As a brand, you have to be cognizant about the diversity and inclusion of the people that you hire, the products, like what's the environmental impact, what are your emissions, like so brands really have to be cognizant of what they're doing. And as they always should have been that way. And there are brands that have been more future facing, I guess you could say, for people on the planet. But like you have a young child and that the impacts of just the waste consumption of what is being produced is going to be our legacy for your child to be raised in this environment that's just going to be like wrapped in plastic. It's not
I mean,
necessarily the footprint that we want.
no, for sure. I mean, that definitely gives me anxiety, but it's kind of funny because they're so young
Right.
and they're so aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have a solution of it, but they're aware in a way that I don't think our generation was aware, and that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean,
I want to, yeah,
like if you think about it, our generation wasn't into fast fashion. We never had that, we kind of were like, oh, I'm going to wear this a different way. Now it's just like, in the past like 15 years, fast fashion was like basically introduced. We've had 52 seasons in a year instead of like the, summer, spring, summer, fall, winter. That's what we had growing up. I'm like,
Yeah, for
I
sure.
didn't even think
I
about
mean,
like
yeah,
every week
yeah,
having a different thing. Just wear what I had, or like
and you would be
trade with
lucky, like
friends.
you get from your cousins, from your older cousins.
Completely, yeah. Like when we immigrated to America, we were poor, so thrift shopping was the thing. I didn't even know about a regular store. It's like, I was like, people go to a regular store? That's for groceries, like it didn't even dawn on me that was like a thing. But yeah, like I kind of got into this basically, being curious. And then as I was working in the human rights for garment workers, my mom tells me that in South Africa during the apartheid, my great grandmother and grandfather were garment workers making pennies. And so I was like, oh my gosh, like
What a cycle. That's crazy.
yeah. And the way she phrased it, she was like, why do you work so hard for these people that you don't know? I'm like, I think I'm just doing the right thing, like I've been in fashion for so long, and it's like, it's such a great place to be, and we love to express ourselves, and style's so amazing, but it's also very dark for a lot of people, like for a few people, it's beautiful. And then for, a lot of people in the supply chain, it's like a terrible place to be, and so when she told me that, she's like, oh, blah 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 about my grandparents, I was like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. Like I had no idea. And I was like, we need to do this, we need to advocate for people on the planet. She was just like, where did you get these ideas from? I'm like, I have no idea. Just the more you kind of like go into the space, the more things you dig up, the more research you do, you find all these information, like all
I
this
think it's
like,
amazing to have the connection, because I think it kind of gives even more kind of depth and
yeah,
meaning and to the whole thing. But I'm
yeah,
going to ask you something, because through the pandemic, it felt like we actually went back even, because like garment workers are even, like the situation even worse than pre-pandemic. So how do you, with everything that's happening, how do you think brands navigate that, or they just kind of ignore it, most of them?
I think with the pandemic, it was more of like garment workers felt empowered to have a voice, right? So everything that they were facing the whole time in the supply chain, they actually, they were stronger together, and we were supporting them. And so when we had SB 62 pass, we saw this influx of garment workers that were just like, we're working, we have rights, we have a say in this process, and we shouldn't be taken advantage of. So I think that was really the caveat to like really seeing what the voice was of garment workers, because before they weren't coming out, they were afraid, like. And also there are some people still trafficked in the garment sector here in the United States, and that's why we advocate for better laws, so that people will have a more equitable future for their families. But yeah, I think we saw like a really like a rise up for garment workers, that they weren't going to take this type of abuse from brands anymore. And then other brands realized that, in their supply chain, they don't really know what's going on, because as you mentioned before, it's just, so deep in the supply chain that they really, like subcontractors are working
Yeah,
for
by
the brands.
design, they remove any kind of accountability. Yeah.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be like that, right? If they need to make a design structure matrix of like who needs to speak with who, what's going on where, they need to do it, and the thing is some of these brands are doing better than others, right? But then some of them are just continuing to be shady. We have a campaign with Remake happening right now that is for Levi's to sign the accord, and they refuse to do that. We've done Twitter storms and all of that. People have protested in front of Levi's stores all over the world, right, to get them to sign this accord. And the question is why, right? Like, why do they not want to sign this accord? They say
And the
that
accord is about transparency within the supply chain.
it's
This is
for
what the
garment.
accord is
It's
about.
the accord is just for garment workers' safety. So they say that all of their manufacturing locations and facilities all have this safety precedence, but as it seems, it's like, obviously Rana Plaza was 10 years ago now, and we just saw a month ago there was something that happened in Bangladesh. I believe it was like a fire in a garment worker facility. And so we continue to see this, and there were big brands that were getting their stuff done, but we've also seen a lot of big brands sign on to the accord, and if what I've seen, like working with brands, is their sustainability, like the head of sustainability doesn't even speak to the sourcing person. So the sourcing person's just sourcing fabric, sourcing, mills and all this stuff. And then the sustainability person is over here, like after the fact, putting out the fire, or you know what I mean? Like theoretically, like putting out, trying to like, figure out the loose ends at the end of whatever already just happened. I'm just like, well, if you two could just talk to each other.
Yeah, redesign the whole kind of supply chain process. And
yeah, and it's like at this point, those big brands, like, have they not made enough money? It's like, like, if you lose a few $1 million by stepping back and restructuring your whole supply chain and actually being accountable for everything that's happening there, you'll gain money in the long run, right? Like it's just like, I don't know, it feels like they're robbing Peter to pay Paul.
So do you think it has to do with now, I mean, there is a consumer, and then we can talk about it, but in terms of government and legislation, you think that's kind of what's going to make the next big difference if we really get like pass more and more laws like the XB 62 and all of that?
I definitely think that legislation is the way to go, but there's a whole formula to it, right? Like, you can't just have legislation without having the consumers advocate for the change, right? Because this change starts with consumers. The brands, like CEOs, like to say that consumers don't know what they want. Consumers know exactly what they want, right? If you give the consumer education, if you have them know what's going on, like I see it with even the content that I post, like when I'm posting some like policy, or when I'm posting some kind of just like news that happened in the supply chain, or just things like that, to just raise awareness on pressing topics globally, consumers will share that like a million times, because they want their friends to know, like, hey, we shouldn't shop this brand because this is what's happening in their supply chain, and this is what they're doing, right? So the cost of that pants or the cost of that shirt is like way more expensive, because like, what's the cost of human rights, right? What's the cost of a human life? And so I think that what I've seen so far in the past like 4 years of just going in with the policy stuff is that you have the consumers, you have the brands. Consumers need to become advocates too. They can email brands, they can let brands know, like, hey, can you try to not use this toxic solvent or this toxic additive in your product or whatever, because it's harming the environment or whatever. So when you have like all the synapses firing at once, right? You have the consumer, you have like the policy, you have lawmakers being educated, because some of these lawmakers, they don't even know what's happening, right? They're like so far removed from all of us, even though we're their constituents. I realized that when I was like calling lawmakers to co-sign some of this legislation, I was like, you can't even leave a message.
You have no idea.
Yeah, you can't even leave a message on this person's like voicemail. Like, how are they doing business? This is somebody that's like advocating for laws, and you have to literally find somebody that they trust within their like in Congress to like get them to sign a bill. Like, we shouldn't be having that. They're like public servants, right? So voting for better lawmakers that are going to be working and not just like leave you hanging if you call them and try to have them advocate for a bill that's really good for people on the planet. We get lawmakers in there that are active, that are like excited to do the work, right? That are not just going with the flow of just like whatever their friends are doing, because it just doesn't work. But and then we get stricter laws, right? Also, I was reading, do you ever read Plastic Soup? So
No.
it's an NGO out of, I think it's they're out of the UK, but they have like these really amazing case studies that they release every year. So they work with different universities and stuff like that. But the case study was on the beauty industry and the ingredients in the beauty products. And so they were stating that, you know, some of these additives and stuff like that, like I was telling you, the dimethicones and the pegs are toxic for the environment because they're releasing like nanoplastics and microplastics, right? So they were advocating for better laws, right? But what they had found was some NGOs were like, oh, okay, so if the European Commissioner was like trying to get the definition for microplastics.
Yeah.
So they're like, okay, so if they have this definition for microplastics and they leave out all this other stuff like nanoplastics and things like that, right? Basically, it was like, if they pass the definition for microplastics, then brands are gonna potentially, you know, keep their ingredients, or maybe they're gonna remove their ingredients and invent new ingredients. But when they invent new ingredients, what's going to happen is that there's going to be no regulation. We're not going to know the toxicities of the ingredients to people or the environment. And so the research was saying that is it like, do you stick with the devil that you know or the devil that you don't know, right? So I'm not sure what the European Commission voted on as far as the definition for microplastics. I think they're still working on it. But they were like, oh yeah, we should have nanoplastics be one of the, you know, the little sidebars underneath like the definitions so that people know, and all these different ingredients that we're going to put in there. But then they're like, well, big companies like, you know, your Estee Lauders and your L'Oreal's, their scientists can just formulate a different additive that would do the same thing, but who knows what the results will be like on the people and planet, right? So I was just like, this is a mess.
But this is, I think, what I think, you know, like as a consumer, we might be a little bit like overwhelmed, and you're just like, okay, so how do I educate myself in the right way? If I'm on a budget, how can I, like, you know, be mindful and of the planet's sustainability, but not something like that's gonna cost me a fortune. So I think it's, how do you advise like consumers how to behave, how to consume?
First of all, I would have them read the back of the labels. Know what's in your clothing, know what's in your beauty products. And you don't need to know all of the ingredients, right? But you need to start with some of the ingredients. You know, some of the ingredients that are bad for the environment, we don't want them to go in the runoff, and then we're like literally drinking this water because it's not regulated to like take this out of the water, you know what I mean? So it's like the fish are eating this. Like they found plastics. I was telling you that I did that panel the other day, but the scientists and researchers are finding plastics in zooplankton. So the fish that we're eating are eating this stuff, and then we're ingesting
I
it.
saw your TikTok, I was like, oh God.
Yeah.
With like plastic is everywhere. How do I do it? You know, like, you know.
Right. It's so bad. And so, you know, we shop with our dollars, or we like vote with our dollars, right? So our shopping habits need to be cognizant of like what our effects are going to be in the future, right? So we can change things. We are more than like the lawmakers, we make up more of the population than like all the brands, right? Because there's like a handful of brands everywhere, like fashion, beauty brands, like all the stuff. But if people aren't shopping these brands, they're not going to make money, so they have to restructure the way that they're doing business. But that should be an incentive for them to change the way that they're formulating their stuff. And if the products can't be recycled, that's like one aspect of it. One aspect is like the bottle recycling situation, or it's like the ingredients are just as important as like the recycling situation.
The packaging and recycling, of course.
Yeah, because so in another study that I was reading, a UNEP study, they were saying plastic situation, right? They were covering that. They were saying that like women in a woman's bloodstream, there's higher level of microplastics than in a man's, and it's probably because of all the products that we're using, right? And it's like this influx of, I guess it's a psychological issue, right? Like that we need to buy all these products and like buy this that makes you this and that. It's like, or you could just buy products that you need when you need them, and so it's kind of like reversing that whole like psychological damaging issue of like, you need this, you need that, like consumerism, right?
Yeah, that's a whole other
Yeah.
That's all. It's. I was actually listening to this podcast the other day from this book that I just ordered. The world is on fire, but we're still buying shoes, and it's exactly like I feel like consumerism is such kind of like interesting part of who we are as a society that I think it's just like how to kind of buy smarter, buy better, and educate ourselves better. And so is there kind of, do you know like about a database that would give me all of this information? Or I know like at some point I was using Think Dirty, the app,
Yeah,
but it wasn't, I stopped using it because a lot of the smaller brand that I like to kind of use and support wasn't on it. So I stopped it. So what do you think I can kind of educate myself in general?
the Plastic Soup Foundation, I think, has a database. Then their database is pretty like they have a lot of brands on there. Also, the EWG, they do have like a database that's for beauty, but like for fashion, Remake has a database that will talk about like human rights factors, like garment workers and wages. So they'll score brands, and then Stand Earth will do this overview on factory and materiality of brands. So Stand Earth focuses on like petroleum-based products and fossil fuel emitting brands, right? So all of the brands that you know and love, you can see how they're scoring, and like some of the brands that we love that we think are better than others are not really scoring as high because they might be working on something materiality wise, right? But they are still using burners in their supply chain and not switching their manufacturers over to solar or like renewable energy. So that's another factor. And so it's kind of like, it's kind of spicy. Kind of love that. But yeah, so those are the few that I would, start with. And, like when you start looking into stuff like this, you'll start just being curious and, making friends in the industry that are just like aware of things. And like my friends and I, we send each other like, oh my gosh, this article on this, did you see what's happening over here? And then the crazy part is, I mean, this is not that crazy, but when you see somebody that's like, scoring low with their garment workers, they're usually scoring low in the materiality. And so the problem is, right, is like when we're wrapped in plastic, when we're wearing clothes that are just like wrapped in plastic, right? Our skin is the biggest organ of our body, right? So we need to be cognizant of like the products that we're putting on our body. So if we're we're just buying a new jacket, right? There's so many chemicals that are going into that. And that's why, like, obviously buying secondhand is so good, because the products have been washed so many times, or buying a smaller brand that might be a little more pricey, but they're not using like a toxic dye, or their impact is lower, or they're doing smaller runs of products. And then once they sell out, it's like, it's done, you know? So yeah,
it's us. Literally, yeah.
and that's why I love like you guys and like what you're doing, because it's like that is, if it's gone, it's gone. You know, if you didn't get it, you didn't get it. Wait till, like, you know, someone doesn't want it, which they're not gonna. You know what I mean? So
I mean, it's so true, and it's kind of hard for a consumer to understand this behavior sometimes, because yeah, it's like everything we do is out of like what we found in terms of leather, you know, like we
yeah,
don't produce, we only get the leftover. So I don't know if I'm gonna ever find this leftover again. And I think we saw it this way because we visited a lot of like factories and everything, and we saw the amount of waste that we don't think of, like all the things that they end up buying, or they overproduce and everything. There is so much to do with that, that, you know, like that was a way of finding a solution, you know?
yeah, it's so true.
It's,
And it's like, if you have the capability of just like thinking that way, right? Why wouldn't all the people think that way? But they don't, right? Rather, they just like will completely take out trees in the Amazon just for more cattle farms and more tanneries, and like all the process of, you know, dyeing and doing the process of leather, essentially, right? With the resins and like all the stuff. They'd rather do that than like, it's actually like, it's cheaper for people to just like use the terrible materials, because it's already there, right? For people just to like utilize. Like I see it with plastics and stuff too. It's like they'll just rather not do the right thing, and they're just like, oh well, it's cheaper. It's like, well, if you bought the other product, then you could actually create this like demand for better supplies. But not everybody thinks like with
yeah.
planet in mind.
And so I think that's really very important, because like I don't know if from a consumer point of view we're so much aware of greenwashing, or we just tired because everyone and their mother like are saying I'm sustainable, I'm trying to be sustainable. So I think it's kind of very hard for consumer to navigate the greenwashing kind of wave. What do you think about that?
Oh yeah, it's crazy, because like, I mean, I've fallen victim to it. Some of these campaigns are so good. I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. And we all want to have like a quick fix of a solution, right? Like
Yeah,
everybody wants to have some kind of like, oh, there's like this like amazing solution to this and that. It's like, we're not even there yet, you know? Like in all industries are trying to figure it out. And I say, like, before a consumer buys a product, all they need to do is Google it, because the news is going to pop up. It's going to propagate stories, right? So all they need to do is just scroll and look. And I mean, it takes 5 minutes. Like these people that are shopping Shein, it's like they're terrible. They're terrible to their workers. They're terrible
I
to the
really,
environment.
I really genuinely don't understand, because I mean, this has had so much heat. Like this brand has had so much heat. Like how can, you know, like how can it be such a fast growing, you know, brand? It's just crazy.
Yeah. And most brands, like people don't realize, a lot of billionaires, you know, like even like if we think of like, you know, David Rockefeller back in the day, right? So basically the reason why we have gas powered engines is because like David Rockefeller, Nikola Tesla produced uh like an EV vehicle in 1900. It was like 1901. He like had patented this and all of that. And he was going to make these cars, and even Henry Ford had created an EV engine, right? Because he's like, oh well, Nikola Tesla, you know, produced this, like we need to start doing this. So David Rockefeller comes and he's like, oh no, I just started, like investing in petroleum and crude oil. So we've got to make cars that run on this, because I just, started doing that. And now our whole world is run off this, right? So, we can go all the way back to the bad decisions, but like, I mean, people are making these decisions all the time, right? Like when we have a bio-based material, or when we have like something like that, it's like we've got to think about what the ramifications of the future. We've got to do the studies and like wait for the results to see what this is, it's going to be like, because oftentimes, the billionaires are running the ship. They're literally making money off of wars and like all these things, and then we're sitting there and just like trying to be better in society, but it's like really these people that need to get like their 2 cents.
Are you watching Succession?
I haven't. I found that a really hard show to watch, because I thought the characters were very annoying in the first season.
Oh my God, wait until you see that episode about, it's exactly it. Like even like the people they put in power, the people they help put in power, it's just kind of help their their fortune grow, basically. Like it's kind of like it feels extremely calculated, everything. And it's exactly those billionaires who like make very strategic decision about how about their interests.
Oh, completely. And so like when we look at the great scheme of things, it's like, wow, why are we just letting this stuff play out? If somebody would have told David Rockefeller, hey guy, like, no, we should go with these like EVs, we wouldn't even have a job right now. We wouldn't even be having this discussion, because we would have had such a better environment, right? If you think about like that, the past 100 years and like what the trajectory has been, and now people are scrambling to fund solutions, and like the solutions aren't scalable, or maybe they are, but it's going to take so many years for bio based actual material that will biodegrade, because there's a difference between a bio-based material and a biodegradable material, right? It's not all the same, because you can have a bio-based material with a toxic resin, and that stuff is going straight to landfill, total greenwash, right? Or you have a biodegradable material that will, like, at the end of its life degrade, like seaweed or whatever. But yeah, so it's tough for consumers these days. There's a lot of crap out there, and people just have to like do some of their own research and be their own advocates. Like the thing with Shein making clothing with lead in it for children. I mean,
yeah,
like, are we surprised? Like, not really, but that was pretty low. You know what I mean?
I mean, yeah, even if you're not that interested into human rights, but the fact that what you put on your own body, what you put on your kid's body, that's should bring an alarm to you. It's crazy.
Yeah, people need to know when they're shopping for like a $20 pair of jeans, like there's a cost somewhere to that. Yeah, there's a cost to that. There's the environmental impacts and human impacts on a $20 pair of jeans. A pair of jeans that has obviously more sustainable might be like $100 and some dollars, but they probably use less water. They probably paid their garment workers, like a brand of shoes that is a little more expensive. It's like, not everyone can afford that. Now I'm seeing like at the thrift store, there's like Shein and H&M and Zara stuff. Crazy. You don't have your regular old school, just like amazing pieces from the 60s. Like that stuff's all snatched up. You have Zara Zara dresses. I'm like, and then they're charging the same price as Zara for a secondhand dress. I'm like,
something is off in.
Yeah, but I think also people need to like learn how to mend their clothing and just like wear what's in their closet, and not succumb to some of this stuff like that. They need a new pair of jeans. Like nobody needs 100 pairs of jeans. Where are you, like, where are you wearing those to? Like when, when, you know?
And at the end of the day, exactly, like it's still like you need to respect the person who made it, whatever, if it's, you know, H&M, Shein, or a more kind of expensive brand. There being human being behind that made it, and you need to respect it. And I think one of the way to respect it is kind of caring a little bit more and not be kind of that kind of over consuming. It's just, you
Yeah,
know, like I wear it twice, it's such a bad quality, let me throw it away. Yeah, that's not only disrespectful for the planet, but it's also disrespectful for the person who made it. You know,
yeah,
there is something in that.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. But also the thing that, you know, like when you have when you listen to the stories of the garment workers and like stuff that they're facing. So with Remake, we hop on calls like every month and they'll have like garment workers talk about like some disparities. Like we worked on a campaign last year that was for because shocker, Victoria's Secrets wasn't paying their garment workers in Cambodia.
Yeah, I
Sometimes,
remember that. Yeah.
yeah, sometimes the laws change, you know, like in different countries, and they raise the minimum wage, and then the factories don't want to pay it. So the brands need to advocate for the factories to pay their garment workers correctly, right? But yeah, they
But they're
won't
like,
pay.
oh, we don't know as we paid, you know, this is the agent, this has nothing to do
Yeah,
with
it's
us.
like no, you are getting your products made there cheap. You sourced that specific factory, so you are responsible for it. Um, but yeah, it's just interesting, you know, because you hear the stories from the garment workers, and it's just like, wow, this is ridiculous. Like, how are people being treated this way? You know? So it really has an
Yeah.
impact on helping make the change when you can actually like hear the stories and you're like, oh, okay. So this is how it works. So this is the mentality, and this is what's happening, you know? Because some people, like when I talk to brands, they're like, oh, well, we're creating jobs. It's like, I think the person would be better off like with a different job. They don't need to work for you. You're not creating an equitable job, you know, like they can't feed their family off of working 18-hour days for your shirt, you know, like it's kind of crazy.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you should be responsible to create better jobs and, you
Yeah.
know, in a more responsible way. It's not, yeah, it's not good enough.
Yeah. I spoke to one CEO that like actually doesn't work at this brand anymore, but like this was 6 years ago. I went to a summit like just about sustainability, and I asked like the next event was like a dinner with a brand, right? And so I was sitting there next to the CEO. I don't know why people put me next to the CEO. Like, what you think I'm gonna do? Obviously, I'm gonna grill this person, you know, on like what their decisions are and where they're going with the future of the company. So I was just asking him questions, like not being mean, but just like, oh, you know, this is going to be a big trend, sustainability. Do you guys know this and that, you know, about your garment workers, and like what's your like 5-year track of like your supply chain and all this stuff. This guy was like, honestly, I never thought about that. The guy got fired and they hired a different CEO for this brand. It was awesome. I was just like, the because I thought about it, I'm like, it didn't occur to you to know your supply chain or anything like that. Like, wow, you know. And it was a
But
big
I
demo
think
brand.
that's actually a very important point, and that's something that personally it has always disturbed me. Like in fashion, there is so much. There is like the kind of extremely visible part, you know, like the modeling and everything, and the brand. There's, you know, like all of the imagery, marketing, everything. There is very little connection with the supply chain, the actual, you know, garment work and everything, and that's always disturbed me. And I think that's kind of something that in the fashion industry, like it's something that should be raised a lot. Like, yes, it's amazing to take a lot of calls, and you should, but also look at what your industry that's paying you, feeding you, and, you know, employing you is treating their own people. And there is a disconnection in that.
Oh yeah, completely. And these brands sometimes they think they're like, oh, we're just gonna hop to a different factory that has like less you know, noise, like less news or whatever. It's like you should actually do the research on the supply chain. You should actually get like artisan makers, and those are the heroes of your brand because they're making your products. They should be, you know, compensated correctly and treated well. and all this stuff, but you can't teach that type of thing because they don't teach that at like your business school, you know. I always get invited to these most random forums. So I was on one for Wall Street Journal, and Walmart was the one talking about sustainability. And I was like, well, Walmart, you know, like I was like in the comments, I'm like, I've got a lot to say about Walmart, you know, because Walmart sold their holdings for their clothing brand, right, to a UK brand, a UK holdings. They sold their it was like their clothing manufacturer for their in-store Walmart brand clothing. They sold it to holdings in the UK, and they didn't pay the garment workers because they said, we sold it, it's their problem. But they didn't pay the garment workers what they were supposed to do, what they were supposed to pay them before they had sold the company. And so there was a professor from, forget the university, it's a pretty big university, but and notable MBA program. And so he's like, sends me like a side message. He's like, hey, could you send me those articles again? Because like I didn't know that. But he literally told me that he had Walmart sustainability head come in and talk about how amazing Walmart is doing with their like, you know, sustainability program. I'm like, yeah. If you get rid of your low-hanging fruit, everybody's going to do good if they get rid of the low-hanging fruit, right? Like there's clearly like, you know, places and companies with liability, and they're like, well, if we get rid of that, then we're going to look really good. Yeah, of course you are, you know, but you really didn't take care of what needed to be taken care of. You actually just like pawned it off, like you were saying earlier, pawned it off to another, you know, person to have to deal with it. And so the holdings was saying that they don't have any responsibility with what Walmart did before. So then the person that was like, you know, or the people that were literally getting taken advantage of were the garment workers. And so they had lost wages, and they still have not gotten the wages recovered. And I mean, like Urban Outfitters, Anthropology, they're all in the same boat. Free People, they have not paid garment workers from like lost wages from 2020. And I see bloggers posting about, you know, like, oh, this Anthropology dress, you know, I'm like, and I'll send them DMs.
No, yeah.
This Free People, Anthropology, like Urban Outfitters situation, you know, like their garment workers have not been paid since 2020 for lost wages. Like they don't care. They don't pay bloggers. They don't pay garment workers. Like, why are you posting about the dress? You know, and why are you giving this brand, because they sent you $300 dress, why are you giving them press? They're a shit company, you know? So yeah, I don't know, people, I have a lot of fun though, like in those chats when they have these like huge companies like Walmart's doing so great. I'm like, how do you think the Waltons became billionaires?
Yeah.
They're not doing the right, you know what I mean? They weren't like, oh, if we all take advantage of people, right? We all take advantage of people. We will go to the top super fast, right? And still have all these like minions working for us, like making low wages. That's how people get super, super rich. They have no morals, you know, no values, like, but yeah. But then, you know, obviously they made a foundation, so have the Walton Foundation.
Oh, yeah, to feel good about, yeah.
And it's always like the younger generation of like the huge conglomerates, like when the parents made billions and didn't care about anything, you know. We see there like Rockefeller Foundation, and I don't speak, you know, like I'm not trying to be negative to all of these like, you know, people, because I'm like, I know some of them and stuff like that, but I still give them shit, you know. Still gonna do it. But yeah, it's like kind of dirty money in a way.
Yeah, it's exactly it. Yeah, it's dirty money. It's true. It's
yeah. But it seems
so
like
what's
Gen Z is a little bit like, some of them are doing Shein hauls, and then some of them are like, oh, we care about the people on the planet, we're just sewing our, you know, jeans into a corset. So it's like,
Yeah. I
it's
mean,
just
it's true,
fun.
but I mean, I realize it's very true that I think Gen Z is probably the better generation in terms of kind of awareness and interest in that.
Yeah.
But like at the end of the day, they're still driven by cost. And so I think that's kind of most brands bet on. Like
Yeah.
the, yes, system is important, but what's the number one factor has to be the price.
Hmm.
So I think that mentality has to be changed. Exactly as you say, we don't need 52 collection because you don't need that many garments. You just need better garment for everyone, for you and
Yeah.
for everyone around you.
You just need well-made products that, you know, if you have your own capsule collection of your outfits, then great. Wear your outfits. Like,
Be
you know,
creative, yeah, what you have.
yeah. Um,
Yeah,
I
I
had,
love your video and it's like we went and like you had a video where you literally wore the same outfit a few times. It's just like,
yeah, I
yeah,
love it. And like
yeah.
honestly, as like a person, like, on social media, isn't it nice to be able to wear like something on a red carpet again and again, and it like, like I'm like, it's an amazing made dress. It's not my dress, but it's an amazing made dress. So I'm gonna wear it a lot because I can just pull it, I don't need to run around and like
And
try
that's
to.
cool. And it should be cool. And I think that's kind of like an important message. Yeah, rewear your stuff and rewear it and be seen again with it. It's
Yeah.
it's
And I've seen some like celebrity stylists also have been advocating for that too, which has been really cool because you see the celebrities are wearing stuff on the carpet that maybe they're styling it a little differently, but it's still like the same dress, which I'm like, that is awesome because that's like what people look at and they're like, oh, I need to be more like so and so, actress. The crazy part about all the sustainability talk. So I usually go to DC for this economist conference, and I think it's in June. I'm not going this year because Shein is they are the head sponsor of the Economist Sustainability Conference.
I'm just yeah, I find it so shocking, like so shocking the kind of like disconnect in like especially Shein, like it's so much under the fire. Like how can you connect them with sustainability? It's just
Like clearly
ridiculous.
they had the money to pay for the spot, but I'm like,
But not for their people. Yeah, let's not
yeah, I'm
exaggerate.
like,
Yeah.
what are we doing here? Like, and I thought to myself, I was like, maybe I should just go to this conference to talk shit to people, to be like, you're from Shein. Okay. Like, let's talk about this. Like, what exactly are you doing? But
Which
then
is
I'm like,
true. It's yeah.
I
It
don't
might
know
be
if
good
that
to
would really make
go.
a difference because they clearly don't care. So like, what is it going to be like? Oh, me just being there, like, telling them what they already know. So it's like a waste of my time. But then I'm just like, you know what? Then again, I'll just educate consumers, push better policies, hang out with my friends that we are like-minded and stuff like that. Because I mean, if they haven't changed any policies or anything so far, they're not going to do it if like I go all the way to DC and like, you know what I mean? Like we have to change policies to have them like make a change in their companies. They just care about like their dollar. They want to make money. And if they like take it, if it takes the whole environment to burning down for them to make their billions of dollars, they're going to do it, So it's crazy. And I couldn't believe the Economist actually like signed off to that.
That's what I found very, very odd. Like it's not like, some like it's kind of like The Economist. It's, it wouldn't be very difficult for them to find like someone to sponsor. So just
or a bunch of
surprised that
smaller, like renewable energy companies.
especially for the sustainability, it's like a joke.
Totally. Like, or all these foundations, they could have reached out to the foundations of like banks, because they fund stuff like that. But I was just like, this is ridiculous. I'm not going to leave
So
New York
what's your
City
plan for the next what's your kind of like perspective for the next kind of few you know, with all those goals, like what do you see yourself kind of
Yeah,
navigating through?
on June 1st, we have a meeting. It's a convening for the UN Conscious Fashion Lifestyle Network, and that'll be at the United Nations. So attending that, our Conscious Fashion Lifestyle Network is very fashion heavy. So I'm going to try to talk to them about the plastic situation, which they'll probably just be like, oh, here, talk to somebody from UNEP because they're working on that or something like that. But I want the Conscious Fashion Lifestyle Network to get more into the lifestyle of the like obviously fashion is like, they're really, really focused on that. But I think there needs to be like a topic of discussion around the beauty industry, and like, because it's wasteful.
Yeah.
And I think that they have like a goal of doing that, but it just hasn't happened yet. But yeah, I think we need to focus on the beauty industry as well as fashion, because we can do this at the same time. We don't have to work in a silo and just like work on fashion and then like, beauty industry continues to like pollute the environment.
Right. So yeah, it's so hand to hand.
Yeah. So pushing this
Promise.
plastics narrative, because it needs to be at the forefront. We need to reduce the plastics in our cosmetics and in our clothing, in our closets. Some of the outfits that I've had, like, because I literally like, I have a lot of clothes that I've had for years, right? And some of the polyester stuff, after so long, they just like break apart.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is embarrassing. Like,
Yeah, no, for sure.
should have known that before, like before I got that product. But yeah, or like I see like the finishing on some of like the like because now it's been some years of like the vegan leather, right? Some of the finishing is like melting off. I'm like, wow, this is probably pretty toxic, probably pretty bad for me and the
Yeah.
environment.
To be something touching your skin.
Yeah. And some of the dyes, are just like, getting on my nail polish. Like, I'm like, what is going on? I have cool stuff in my closet from a long time ago, but like the regulations
What's the
probably
harm?
lacked. You know what I mean? Like there's like lack of regulations on these items back then. So it was probably kind of toxic.